Welcome to the Silicon Slopes Conversations. This week we've got Paul Yoachum, who's the co-founder of FindMojo. How are you?
Good. Thanks for having me.
You bet. We're going to find some mojo.
We're going to find some, yeah.
I love the name, which is always a good start, because there's some names where it's a bit tricky to even say the name of the business, so this one's easy.
We wanted something that we at least could spell. We did have a big debate around whether or not we should make it one word or two words. We made it one word. Essentially, we were able to get the web domain, and that's really what sealed the deal for us, right? We didn't want to have to spell something that's a normal word a little bit differently. But yeah, we like it. We think it's a cool name, and it really does tie to what we do. And we were talking to an executive once who said, "Man, I have just been in a funk, and I just need to find my mojo." And it kind of hit us like a lightning bolt, like, that's the name.
Yeah, and finding the mojo is a moving target, right, for a lot of people and a lot of organizations. And as you grow and get older or find a new job, you've constantly got to find it. So with that, let's start with a little bit of the founding story, and then we're going to have fun with a lot of stories and data in and around what you guys do. But for those that aren't aware of what the company does, what do you guys do?
Yeah, FindMojo, we've created a diagnostic, a psychometric behavioral assessment called the Motivators Assessment. So most people are familiar with a personality-based assessment, something like a DISC, a Myers-Briggs, or a strengths-based assessment like Gallup Strength Finder. Our tool measures specifically what gets people excited and out of bed in the morning, what gets them excited at work, what concepts do they have, what concepts can they infuse into their work that bring more passion, what will help a person do more of what they love to do. And so we've identified these 23 core motivators. And so we sell this assessment, and we help organizations really to improve employee engagement, employee motivation, talent retention. If you've got people, not everybody in your organization, as you probably know, is happy and always bringing their best selves to work. So if we can help them uncover a little bit more about what those core intrinsic drivers are, this tool does that. And then we've got a whole course that we help teach leaders on how to implement and align those motivators with the work that people do every day.
Gotcha. I feel like I have an organization in my brain that lacks motivation, and then the other one's trying to motivate it. But what do you define as an organization? More than one? Or is there a number?
Yeah, I mean, essentially the assessment was built from the standpoint of it's personal, right? These are my core motivators. Even though everybody in this room, if they were to take the assessment, we all share the same 23 common motivators, but we all have them in a different order. So not anybody in here would have the same. In fact, a group this size, we probably wouldn't have even two people that had the same top 7. To have the same 23 in order, we need a group of more than 1 million people. So we're willing to help even down to the individual level, but where we focus mostly is on, after people have discovered their own motivators, then, gee, I'm curious what motivates my team, what motivates my boss, right? So we look at it at least from a team level, and we like to say, well, you need to have at least 3 people to be considered a team. But we'll work with anybody of any size, and so, yeah. Okay.
So I'm always interested in groups and companies like y'all where you're going to tell other people, and you guys have some really impressive big logos on your website, right? And they know a thing or two about workplace organization and motivation, but you're going to tell them this is scientifically based, and
right.
You've got your whole spiel. So at what point were you confident enough, and ultimately what was your knowledge base to come up with the assessment, the 23?
Yeah, I'd like to take credit that it was all my brainchild, and I did all the research and did all the heavy lifting and all the data analysis. But we at FindMojo are blessed and fortunate to work with some really, really smart people. So just to kind of take us a step back there to kind of dovetail into your question. So the assessment, we looked at a 10-year study on workplace motivation. It was the largest study ever conducted. And it was conducted by a world-class team of researchers and New York Times bestselling authors, psychometricians, mathematical wizards, people much smarter than myself. And they distilled more than a million surveys and millions of data points into these 23 common motivators. And really we boiled it down. I'm a simple person. We like to say that the more simple we can make things, the better. And so we distilled it down to, could we really answer 3 questions? First, what makes a person want to quit a job? You know, when somebody starts a new job, most people don't call up their friends and say, yeah, I'm starting on Monday, and guess what? I'm going to just totally mail it in. I'm going to phone it in. Most people go into a new job pretty excited. But over 6, 12, 18 months, you check in with them again, and they're like, oh, this is terrible, right? So what are the factors that increase and decrease workplace motivation? And really, you know, what gets people excited out of bed in the morning? What's most important to you in your work right now, today? And so they made it simple. We could answer those 3 questions. And so for me, once I could realize, I don't have to know all the psychometric analysis and the algorithm and the things that go into the assessment. Yes, that's important. We work with a lot of people that geek out on stuff like that. But for us, everybody can relate to, there are parts of my job I don't like. There are parts of my job I wish I could do more of. And so that's kind of where we focus. So even with these huge companies like Disney and Wendy's and Ford and, you know, awesome clients that we're able to work with that have full-blown leadership and learning and development teams, they don't have a tool that measures specifically, that's not as scientifically valid and statistically valid as this tool for measuring workplace motivation. And so they use it in conjunction with a lot of other initiatives. But regardless of what they're doing, you know, they're doing all these training programs and people are still unhappy. They're still disengaging in droves. You could have the best communications training program in the world or the best accountability training, but if people don't want to get out of bed and come to work in the morning, you know, I don't care how good you are at giving them feedback. They'll be like, I got to find something else, you know. So at the end of the day, I kind of joke, we talked about this, but it's like, if you've got people, you've got problems. And the bigger the organization, the more complex those problems are. And so that for us provides an opportunity. I know it's a long-winded answer, but that kind of also kind of tells a little bit about our why we do what we do as well. So
Yeah. And the cool thing is you guys have the data, droves of it, and whether it's you or your team, that's a skill set, right, to extrapolate the data. But you can see it pretty quickly, I would assume, right?
yeah, so just to kind of talk through this logistically, the assessment's 100 questions. It takes people about 10 to 15 minutes. And then you're immediately showing your 23 motivators right away in this awesome full-page report, 40-page report. But then we can go in and with our platform, we're actually a SaaS company or an ed tech company, in that we can go into our platform and, you know, like let's say this whole half of the room here had taken the assessment and I knew who they were. I can go in and select who they are, and I can spit out a team report that will show me, if I was their manager, these are their motivators they have in common. This is where this person's the only one that has it that's unique. This person and this person have 2 motivators out of alignment, you know. For example, this person has pressure as a top motivator. This person has pressure as a bottom motivator. Well, why is this person always stressed out? Because this person's always stressing them out, you know. And so, but then you can start to mine the aggregate database and look at things like, what motivates millennials? What motivates Gen Z? What motivates salespeople? And so we've got all that kind of information now that we've had hundreds of thousands of people take this assessment. And so we can glean some really cool insights. The other thing that's cool about motivators, unlike other things, is that motivators change. So what's important to you today, 12 months from now, might not be as important. So you can see what things move and what went up and down. And we saw a ton of movement during the pandemic, like things that were important to people before weren't important at all, right? And so, but what do we do as leaders and managers? We just have a tendency to treat everybody the same because it's easier, because it's fair. And it's like, no, everybody's really wired differently, so.
So yeah, during the pandemic, you didn't really have to try hard to get people's opinions on how happy or sad they were. They would just divulge those for a long time. And I assume the motivators changed drastically in maybe, I don't know, June of 2020? Like when did the shoe kind of drop and people started?
Yeah, you know, it was interesting. We started looking at it towards the end of the summer just to see if there was enough data on some things. And we analyzed a group of about 10,000 people who had taken the assessment prior to the pandemic and then took it during the pandemic. So a pretty good sample size, right? And we started to notice some things like, for example, empathy. People that had empathy as a motivator. They went to work to listen and hear people's problems. They got excited about that when they could solve people's problems. People that had that low, all of a sudden that started ratcheting up for a lot of people. What was interesting, people who had variety, right? They have variety as a motivator. They don't like, they hate it when things get routine. They get bored if things aren't varied. It plummeted. And we're like, why would variety go down? And they said, before the pandemic, we always craved something new. And then during the pandemic, every day was a fire drill. It was nothing but variety. It's like, I just want some normalcy. And so variety plummeted. Money went up for people because, they were laid off. Now, money was a bottom motivator because, yeah, it was meeting my needs, but now it's not meeting my needs. Now, all of a sudden, in this moment, it's a lot more important. So these motivators can change based on our life situations. They can change based on our circumstances and where we're at. And the pandemic really, really shined a spotlight on that people were just like, for the first time, I think in a lot of people's lives, they started to really question, what do I really want to do? What's really important to me? And so we actually kind of thrived in some ways during the pandemic. Sure, our industry was hit as hard as everybody's was, but we found kind of a niche, so to speak, with this assessment. It really resonated with people.
Yeah, and the headlines from the Wall Street Journal over the last three and a half years, you've got the millennials are a bit tricky, right? You've got the older folks on their lawn yelling at the millennials. You've got the quiet quitters. You've got the mass resignators.
Yep.
For you guys, this just has to be like every day's kind of Disneyland as far as the data goes, right?
Yeah, you're right. You had the Great Resignation where people just up and said they quit. In fact, we saw a Qualtrics study that said that coming out of the pandemic, 50% of managers were looking for new jobs. Managers, those are typically your corporate cheerleaders that are a little bit more loyal, right? And then we moved into quiet quitting, which is essentially like people have just said, I'm going to go to work but not do anything. They show up, but they've quit, but they still come to work. And then the latest trend now, and it always seems to be related to, I'm not trying to knock on younger generations, but there is a tie to social media. So a lot of Gen Z now are doing what is called loud quitting, where they're going on TikTok and they're announcing their resignation. I don't know what the end game is there, what they hope to accomplish with that. I heard a new one just not long ago called Bare Minimum Monday. Have you ever heard of that? Mm-mm. So Bare Minimum Monday, what that is that workers are saying, I need to ease myself back into the work week from the weekend, so I'm only going to do maybe one, maybe two important things on a Monday to ease myself back in. Yeah, so it's a challenge regardless of generation, it is a challenge. But to your point, we have teams of today are not made up of teams of yesteryear. You've got teams that have 4 generations of people: Boomers, Gen X, of which I'm a part of, the greatest generation. But anyway, millennials and Gen Z, and yeah, they don't always see eye to eye. And so people will call us all the time and say, my team is remote. I don't know what they're doing. I've got gig and contract workers that are freelancers. We're not all in the same place. We're global. And we're like, we just know how to get along. And so we start with saying, well, let's see what drives everybody on the team. And so at least it leads to a conversation with managers where it's like, oh, okay, that's why they do what they do, right? And so, it really has been eye-opening. And for the younger generations too, they feel more connected to their jobs and they feel more connected to their teammates by knowing it kind of gives a team in some ways kind of a common language to go off of. Anyway, yeah, so it's the generational thing is definitely a key component of what we focus on.
Yeah. So for me, I interact a lot with those those managers that you were talking about. They tend to, have their own drivers of the business, or they have their own spreadsheets with P&L. They've got people that they have to run those numbers up to. And they were very frustrated and continue to be with basically a lot of what you're talking about. I've got people older and younger, and I can't figure out which way's up or down with a lot of them. So people take the test. Let's say it's 50 group team.
Yep.
And there's a lot of tests that I've taken usually for like job interviews or like some weird corporate retreat, and nothing happens after, right? So I'd assume if you were the manager, possibly even the person that is paying you guys, you'd want some after action and like what's the next phase. So what does that look like?
Yeah, so great question. So, and you're right. I mean, so many managers today, a lot of them are first-time managers, and they may have been good individual contributors. They might have a certain skill set, but they don't know how to manage people. And their natural inclination is just, hey, let's just treat everybody the same because that's easy, it's fair. Oh, we'll just motivate. We'll just give them more money, right? We do a lot of work with sales teams, and that's the huge myth that money's just going to motivate people. And so what we do is we teach not only the assessment really is just a light bulb. It just exposes people to data. Then what do you do with it? So we have a course that actually teaches managers and leaders. It's kind of a professional service implementation where either we train them or we'll train somebody in their organization to deliver it. But we teach 9 specific applications for those motivators. Because the motivators are great in and of themselves. It gives us a clear idea of who we are and what, but how do I implement it? So one of the applications, for example, is of the 9 is tying motivators to recognition. So think about workplace recognition, okay? Everybody here's worked at a place where it's like, oh, hey, good job, here's a gift card. And then 2 weeks later, you notice that $5 gift card was taxed, and then the Subway gift cards were $3.82, right? Why not everybody, if everybody's motivated by different things, they most likely want to be recognized by different ways. So I'll just tell you a quick story. So for me, one of my top motivators is family, right? That's one of the 23. And so that says a couple things. First, I want work-life balance. I want to be able to have a flexible schedule. If you put me in an environment that's rigid, I'm going to become demotivated. I also want to make my family proud. I want to leave a legacy. I want to have them involved in my work. And my family is a small business where, they're intimately involved in what Dad's doing. But a few days after we started the firm, 2 of my business partners sent a package to my house, and it was an awesome gourmet cake. And I opened the card on the cake, and it was addressed to my wife, Aubrey. And I said, this is actually for you. And the founders, the 2 other business partners said, we just wanted to thank you for supporting Paul and joining us on this journey. And it means the world to us and stuff. And so they knew that family was a top motivator. So what did they do? They recognized me and thanked me by thanking my family. Now, the downside is I can never complain about my business partners because my wife always takes their side, right? Yeah. But it just showed that they were playing chess instead of checkers, right? And so it meant way more to me, and it's way more memorable when I tell that story than if they had sent me the cake, right? And so how can you, as a manager, look at your team's motivators and say, okay, you know what? If I gave this person a new assignment, that's actually going to be seen as a reward, not more work, because they're motivated by ownership and excelling and challenge. They want to solve a problem, right? And so that's just one of 9 applications that we teach. So, because we absolutely want those motivators to stick. We want people to be able to actually see a difference and make a change and hopefully make their job a little bit better. We're not going to solve everybody's problem. There's always going to be somebody that has to take out the trash, somebody, there's parts of people's jobs that people won't like, but you know what, if we can make certain things a little bit better, then we might keep somebody in a job 6, 12 months longer, because there's a cost of turnover too, right? Oh,
for sure. Yeah, that's where, we'll get to that part in a second, like the value add for these companies and how you guys have built your business. But, what if the motivators are so far out of whack of I want that, what's it called, Creepy Monday or?
Bare Minimum Monday.
Bare Minimum Monday.
Yeah.
But I want to make as much as Bob Iger. I also want every 3rd Friday off. And it's like, oh, these are pretty far out of whack. Does that ever happen?
Well, all 23 of the motivators are positive concepts, so there are no bad motivators. And so, that's the thing. We make a lot of assumptions that we are motivated by things that sometimes it's not reality. So we just had a situation where you and I were talking before today about how we work closely with people and we think we know them. But when we ask them, okay, what really motivates that person, you may not be able to answer it. We had a client not long ago, and one of the executives said to me, I took this assessment and this this didn't nail me at all. This is like the most inaccurate thing I've ever taken. And I was kind of flabbergasted because most of the time, if you answer the questions honestly, it's going to tell you like what's important to you in your work, right? Come to find out that she had her admin take the assessment. Her admin, who'd worked for her for 15 years, she's like, hey, just do this busy work assignment before this training class that we're putting on. And he's like, yeah, I know you, fine. And he didn't know her at all, even though he managed her life practically in her calendar. In terms of like what gets her excited at work, not even close, right? So she retook it. And so that's the thing. I think we all assume we know, but there will definitely be things that are confirming. Yeah, that sounds just like me. But there are always going to be surprises. And what's really interesting is when you start to go, this is surprising to me, your teammates will go, doesn't surprise us at all, because other people view us through different lenses and things like that. So, but to your point, again, we're not going to solve everybody's problem. So there might be somebody on the team that wants to make Bob Iger money and wants to work every third Thursday. They might be happier somewhere else, and that's okay too. We're fine with having people find happiness elsewhere, because at the end of the day, they're going to start to drill holes in the boat and become kind of a toxic employee, and that's what we want to avoid.
Oh, for sure. So you guys with your team, obviously, you've all bought in and you enjoy the product, selling and the education and the training. How have you guys built your business? You don't do it for free, right?
Right. Yeah, we charge for the assessment, and like I said, if somebody wants to go out and buy it, they totally can from our website. So, but where we make our money is, like I said, we've pivoted from being a traditional training company that goes in and trains classrooms to more of a technology company. We've invested and built out a platform. So we actually license the assessment. Because motivators change, people want to take it often. It's not that cost effective for an organization that has hundreds or even thousands of employees to pay $60 a pop to take this thing. And so we'll license it. And we have started building out annual recurring revenue, which is really cool, because people will say, well, yeah, you're a digital assessment company, but we're an ed tech SaaS company if you think about it. And so some of these large clients will sign multi-year agreements, and we're saying, hey, go crazy. Use this thing, because we're also building a massive database of people and their motivators. And so we're becoming kind of the foremost experts on the pulse. Like, I can tell you what the top 3 motivators are from millennials, for this demographic, for people that are of the legal profession or nurses. You can start to mine this data for our own insights, which is really cool. So yeah, so we license this. We license our content. You can buy an IP license. Or, there are teams who just, managers go, hey, I got 10 people. I just want to buy a la carte. Great, here you go. They can pay for a team report, and we'll do an analysis for them. People can get certified. So we monetize it in a number of different ways, but it's really cool that we've turned it into not a true SaaS monthly subscription business, but certainly one with ARR.
Oh, for sure. We're going to open up to the audience to ask some questions here in a little minute, so if we could get the microphone ready. Get the courage up, get those questions ready for Paul.
Get my courage up.
At the end of the day, you guys also have an opportunity to have some good feedback and some good testimonials and some good stories. What are some of your favorites from, let's do a small, medium, and large client?
Yeah, just I love hearing almost on the weekly, just individuals just saying, hey, this really changed the way I think about my job, right? Just from an individual perspective. Or you know what, this improved my job. On a team level, I love hearing examples of, this changed my working relationship. I'll just tell you a quick story. So we were working with a senior VP at Wendy's, and when we were training them, we had one of their employees come up to us on a break and said, I'm thinking about quitting. I like Wendy's, but I can't work for my boss. Well, when the boss found out about this, she was flabbergasted. She's like, she's my best employee. I give her these tough assignments, and she always delivers. Well, the boss had pressure as a number 1 motivator, as a top 3 motivator, and this employee had it at a bottom 1. Now, she had the ability to finish the job, but she would, crawl under her desk and cry for a half an hour after, because she was constantly stressed out. And the feedback we got was, when they learned this about each other, this saved her job. It saved the relationship. And so hearing things like that it like mended a relationship because they had this insight, that's really cool too. All the way up to, we work with Circe Dynix here just next door. I'll just give us a local example. We work with Eric Keith, their CMO, and they completely replaced their annual performance feedback process. So instead of going to what I call the annual ambush, where you say, hey, you've done a great job, and people will ask you, where do you want to be in 5 years? They have regular, what they call aspirational conversations on a quarterly basis, where the manager sits down with the leader and with their team members and says, what parts of your job do you enjoy? What parts frustrate you? What do you wish you could do more of? And so they're constantly developing people. And even though some people, they may develop them towards an aspiration that takes them away from the company, but while they're there, they're the most loyal employees they have. And so just to hear organizations, we completely redid our annual performance feedback process to couple it around this idea of motivators and aspirational conversations. That's super gratifying to us.
Oh, for sure. And it sounds like you can kind of turn the ship around a little bit quicker with your guys' platform and educational aspect than like a big peer review or
yeah, you
review.
get into, like I said, going back to what we said, we try to keep things simple. There's some great work that some of these large consulting companies do, and they're looking at like this huge model that has this framework that has 40 components and this and that. And most people are just trying to get through the day. They're just like, dude, just give me something that'll, give me a spark here. Give me an insight. Give me some data. And so we've made it simple by design. Our head of sales, our CRO, he loves to use the phrase, simple wins the day. And so, because there's a lot of really great assessments out there, but they are super complex. It's like, what do I do with them? How do I implement this? And people just, with our stuff, I always joke that it has to be simple for somebody like myself to be involved with it. Otherwise, they wouldn't let me anywhere near it because I'd break it.
For sure. As we're talking here, I'm having all these ideas where it would be so fun, at least for me, right, if I had a magic link to send out. There was a time where, because I had worked in venture capital and private equity, and I was familiar with these folks, right? And I think I know what motivates them for the most part, and I always wanted to give them a wide berth, right?
Yeah.
Because they operate at a different speed and level. But I had to interact with them for about a week, and it was 5 or 6 different funds, and it was a trivial amount of money for us. And these are like the tip of the spear. I'd love to give this to the private equity group, right?
Yeah.
Pick whatever logo you'd like there, and see what happens with that one. Because I would think I'd have them dead to rights of what motivates them, but it would be so interesting to see what actually.
You'd probably get some things right, but out of the 23, and again, the 23 motivators are important, but we typically want to focus on our top 7 because that's what's most important to people right now. And so if you were to guess, you'd probably, you get a couple of them, but there'd definitely be some surprises for sure. And the initial assumption might be that private equity, money is going to be a top. We do everything we do for money. Well, to a certain degree. Money is important, right? We all have bills to pay. We all want to go on trips. We want, we need to buy things. But at a certain point, in our lives, we get to a point where money's meeting the needs that we have, and then other things become more important. And in that case, I wouldn't call money a motivator. I'd call it more of a satisfier, right? And so we get into all of this but if you've got somebody on your team that has money in their top 7, guess what? They might do extra work. They might get more excited at work if there's a monetary component involved, right? So you shouldn't ignore that. And again, it's about helping a manager play chess instead of checkers by saying, okay, you know what? I could give everybody a bonus here, and everybody will say thanks. They'll take the money, but for this person, it's going to mean more. The other people, they're going to be miserable again, potentially, in a couple of weeks. In fact, there's a study recently that was done on money that said the dopamine hit of being more excited about work when you get a bonus or an annual performance raise, it lasts about 2 weeks, and then it wears off. Especially if you're working in an environment with, knuckleheads that everything else is wrong. Paying somebody else is just like putting a Band-Aid on a bazooka wound, so.
Yeah, I get it. Let's open it up for questions from the audience. I have a lot more, but we'll start back there.
Thanks for being here, Paul. Love what you're doing. I love your love of what you do. It just comes out what you're saying.
Thank you.
As you interact with individuals and businesses, what role does emotional intelligence and mental health factor in, or how do you manage that part of the relationship? Or is that something you don't deal with because you're more focused on the motivation? Can you talk about that a little bit?
Awesome question. They're absolutely cousins. So if I were to draw a Venn diagram of a makeup of who we are, right? You've got a personality dimension, who we are, how we're wired, are we introverted, are we extroverted? Important dimension. We're not looking to replace that. You've got a dimension that talks about our talents, what we're good at, right? But just because you're good at something doesn't mean you necessarily love it. Everybody in this room can think of something they're good at, but they don't necessarily enjoy it. Andre Agassi was one of the best tennis players ever, hated tennis, right? Then you've got a third bucket, which is where motivators come in, where we look at it specifically from a workplace perspective, but many of the motivators are universal concepts that they apply out. I've had all three of my teenage children take the Motivators Assessment and have found value in it. And then just adjacent to that is emotional intelligence, right, which is how we behave and, are we aware, self-aware of things. And so it's a different dimension that we don't look to replace, but it's kind of a cousin. But there is a direct connection with emotional intelligence that we find that today it's all about, with the younger generation especially, I'll just drop a couple of crazy statistics on you. 75% of Gen Z have quit a job for mental health reasons. 50% of millennials have quit a job for mental health reasons, but only 10% feel comfortable talking to a boss about their struggles. There's this stigma. And so we get called all the time because we're like, look, we really need to help our people build resilience. And one of the big things that builds resilience is that self-awareness, but also if you look at why people quit a job, it's because of the fear of the unknown. They're anxious because they just don't know, where are we going? Do we have a place here? Where do I fit in? So we can use the motivators to show them, look, this is how you can align your work with these things. And it actually does have a resilience place. So it's not meant to replace these other dimensions, but just to work alongside them.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I wonder, how does your product relate to the promotion process or performance reviews?
Yeah, great question. We get asked that all the time, and we get asked, like, hey, is this a hiring tool, right? So let me just address both of those. This wasn't built to predict whether or not somebody's going to be a fit in a job. There's a great tool like Predictive Index that does this. This will predict more about how happy someone's going to be once they're in the job. Now, we get asked all the time about, like, career pathing and job promotions. And what we found is that certainly you need to have the skill set. In order to be promoted and do a certain job, you need to have the aptitude and the ability. When I get on an airplane, I don't care what the motivators are of my pilot. He or she needs to fly that thing, right? When I have surgery, I'm not as concerned about the motivators. But that being said, in smaller or mid-sized organization, there isn't a lot of a career path for people, at least mobility-wise up the ladder. There's not a lot of places for them to go. And so turnover becomes a concern. People feel stuck. If you look at the number one reason why people quit a job, money's not even the top 5 anymore. It's borderline 5. It's people just feel like they're stuck. A lack of career progression is a reason why people quit a job. And so what this Motivators tool does is we've got a process in our training program called job sculpting, where we give people more of what they love. Can they alter certain tasks they don't like doing? Can they transfer things to somebody else? Can they add things? You can actually promote a person and make them feel like it's a promotion without them having to change job levels. They feel like if I gave you more of what you love to do, like think about a time when you were maybe burned out on your job and the opportunity to work with a new team or on a new project or a new assignment, it can be completely reinvigorating to people. So that's where we find in a lot of organizations that people can kind of reboot and jumpstart their career without having to go to that next level. Now, again, there are times when it might make sense for you to leave and go somewhere else if really truly you are stuck. So,
Thank you.
Yeah.
My question was, how do you feel what was your original idea for Find Mojo, and how do you feel that changed over time?
Yeah, great question. It was interesting. My business partners and I, we worked in an organization that shall remain nameless, and we read a book by Dan Pink. I don't know if you're familiar with Dan Pink. He was a Washington speechwriter. He wrote a book called Drive, which was a really popular sales book. And in it, he said, in order to have drive in your job, you need to have mastery, purpose, and autonomy. And we're like, we have all three of those, and we're still miserable. And so we started to see that just because people were good at something, they weren't happy. So we started doing some research, and we started to see that, there really is this third leg of a stool for motivators. And when we would talk, our background was in training and consulting. We would talk to these executives, and they would just say, listen, I would love to transform my culture. I would love to get more out of my people, but I just, right, I'll tell this story. Our CRO was working with with the CEO of one of our clients, and he asked him, how many people work here? Meaning head count. And the CEO stopped and looked at him and said, about half of them. Right? And we didn't know whether to laugh or not. And so we just had these little light bulb moments where it was like, you know what, we spend 90,000 hours of our life on average working, and it doesn't mean every hour is going to be miserable or every hour is going to be bliss, but if we could just make it our mission to help people find a little bit more happiness at work, then we're fulfilled. And so we set out to say there's got to be more than just these 3 components, and as we found from our research, there are 23. I mean, Strengths has 34, strengths that you can have. And again, without getting into the weeds of it, that was essentially the genesis. We weren't very happy ourselves with our work, we weren't unhappy, but we just thought there's got to be more. And if you look at our motivators, they align with kind of our mission and why we did what we did. So, good question.
I've got a question about handwriting analysis.
Okay.
When I was a teenager, I checked this book out of the library, Handwriting Analysis, and I read through that, and it was amazing. And so I've studied that ever since. And you talked about the 23 motivators, and you stack them in different orders. Well, there's the same kind of thing in handwriting analysis, where you have character traits that show up in the handwriting, by the way they form shapes on a page. Mm-hmm. And you stack those, and you get different outcomes from that. So I'm curious, would it be possible to have some kind of an AI machine that would take somebody's handwriting and then map that to the motivators?
That would be really interesting. I mean, without getting too far in the weeds, so what we looked at was we identified these 23 motivators, and what we noticed is that they were like similar concepts. They were cousins. And so using factor analysis, we saw how these group together into what we call identities. These are archetypes. So we've got 5 identities. People who have a proclivity to want to be in charge and solve problems and tackle challenges, we call those achievers. People who want to work with others in friendship and have social awareness in the community, those are builders, right? So we have these 5 identities. We have done a lot of work in mapping motivators to like personality profiles and strengths profiles. Like for example, personality-wise, I've taken the DISC assessment. I'm a high I, which means I'm extroverted, I'm very social. I've taken the strengths assessment, relationship building, it's all about other people. But from a motivator's perspective at work, my number 1 motivator is autonomy. Don't talk to me, let me do my own thing. Don't tell me how to do my work. If you try to micromanage me, I'm out, right? And so those don't align. But absolutely, if you had the data, you could probably see the correlations between, wow, people that handwrite this way are most likely to be thinkers and serial killers. I don't know, right? Yeah. So.
In fact, some of those dangerous characters show up in
Yeah, for sure.
I'm a data scientist, so yes, I could do that for you if you want.
Nice.
Paul, question for you. You mentioned that you actually have given this test to your kids.
Yeah.
Have you also done this for school districts or classes, and what kind of things have you found from that?
Awesome, yes. So while it was built from the standpoint of, for working adults, like I said, the concepts are universal enough in nature that it will apply to other people. So we've done this with K through 12 schools. We do a ton with higher education, with not only their staff, but with their students. And it's not a predictor of like, I should go be a lawyer, I should go be a doctor, but it's like, when I go into the workforce, these are the things I want to have present in my job. I want to make sure that those elements are present, regardless of career path. So yeah, we license this to BYU, to Weber. We've done work with the U of U here locally. We even did, a few years ago, this was pretty awesome, we went into a youth correctional facility with a bunch of juvenile delinquents. Now, they weren't terrible kids, but they're knuckleheads, right? They got into trouble for petty crime. But it was interesting, they took the Motivators Assessment. And even though it talks about it from a work perspective, it was like really emotional when they looked at their results and you listened to them talk to each other and they would say things like, bro, I'm an achiever. Dude, I'm a thinker. I'm a caregiver. These identities, right? And for the first time in their lives, they identified with something other than being called a loser or a screw up, right? And we were like, holy cow, this is pretty powerful, right? And so So yes, it will work for, I've got a 25-year-old, I've got a 21-year-old, a 20-year-old, and a 15-year-old, and they've all taken it and said, yeah, this sounds just like who I am.
Cool. Paul, thank you for being here. I really like your insight, love your energy.
Thanks.
I also like that you gave the kids the test as well. So now they have cars, big fat allowances, nice big TVs, very sweet. Took parenting to the next level. For me, the big debate seems to be the work from home.
Yeah.
I'd love to hear some of the analytics from an employee perspective and an employer's perspective. Because as a manager, you want to be hands-on, right? But for the employee, they want the freedom to, work from home, that work-life balance.
Yeah.
So what do those analytics say?
Whew, I don't want to get myself in trouble here. This might be some of my own personal opinion. I mean, we work with clients that are all over the place, in office, hybrid. I mean, I would love it if I could go out to a client and be on site and train them, but we're still, with some clients, lingering effects that I can only do virtual events. So for us, it's not so much about, look, I'm not going to profess to be an expert on whether one is better than the other. I could make a case that there are certain advantages for being in office. There are certain advantages to being remote. You could make cases for both. I've got clients where they think their competitive secret sauce and their main competitive differentiator is because they're an in-office culture. Where it starts to really get interesting is when companies acquire each other. So we're working with an oil and gas company, and they have an in-office culture in Houston. Well, they acquire all these assets from another oil and gas company up in Alaska that was all remote. And now they're making those Alaskan employees come into the office, and these two cultures are colliding. And so we're not trying to get into the weeds around there. There's some other cultural stuff there, but we're trying to help these new managers understand their people and kind of define what that is. So again, there's advantages and disadvantages, I think, to each. For us, regardless of the environment you work in, the lens in which we view it is, can we help people feel connected to their work, and can we help them feel connected to their team by giving them this common language of motivators? So we're kind of Switzerland on the back to work office. We do have an exercise in our training program where we call it managing to the one. So let's say you're a manager and senior leadership says, everybody's coming back to the office. You as a manager think, well, I'm going to lose half my people, right? So how can you make that situation more motivating to them? Well, maybe I can let the thinkers redesign the office space. That might be exciting to them. Maybe I can let the caregivers set up a carpool, right? So there's ways to kind of think outside the box. That's what we try to profess, is like, how can we take a bad situation, no matter what it is, and how can we tie it to motivators to make it more enticing to them? Yeah. So we try to get people to brainstorm around that.
Good perspective, and appreciate that.
Yeah, no, good question.
This just reminds me of a really good kindergarten teacher I had, where she maybe inherently knew all of this, right? Because there's caregivers and the motivators, and she had jobs and tasks for everyone, and it was the happiest year of my schooling, and I remember it all the way to now.
There's a 24th motivator. There's a couple of motivators that didn't make the cut. Like we get asked all the time, like, is fear a motivator? I think chocolate is a motivator, right? Mexican Coke, as I mentioned earlier, is a motivator, right?
So I imagine taking this to a manager and saying, okay, you have these diverse people with diverse motivators. How do you get the managers to buy into, I don't want to say catering, but to adapting their metrics or their workload or what they do day to day to match up with those motivators?
Yeah, and it is hard for some managers to do that. And the last thing we want to do is try to add more to their plate, because they're just trying to get things done at the end of the day. They're just trying to get through the day. They're trying to get things done. And I was just telling Garrett that, you know what, a lot of managers they check the box. They manage their success by getting things done. And employee engagement really is just 90% of it is just caring about other people. And so, again, going back to our philosophy of trying to be simple, we're like, let's not try to do everything, because then you're going to do nothing. Let's just find one or two maybe little job sculpting ideas that you can do. We call this job sculpting. You've got Becky, who loves to do this and this. Okay, you got Joe, who loves to do this and this. How can I infuse more of that? I'll give you an example. We had an employee who works for us who started out as a a customer support rep. And his aspirations were to be a coder. And he went on to be the computer science student of the year at Utah State. And over time, while he worked for us, we'd let him sit with the development team. We'd let him code things. We'd let him work on our platform and build things. And ultimately, he left, and we had to turn around and contract with him. But while he was there, he was one of the most loyal employees we had, and he thought of things that we wouldn't have thought of. And so just by giving him that little thing to work on, he still had to do his day job, right? But we were able to infuse more of what his passions were. If you look at his motivators, he's motivated by things like impact and learning, and they all aligned with his desire to be a developer. And you know, we had to make sure he wouldn't break things and things like that, so it was done in a controlled environment, but he loved it. He loved it. My background, there's some people in this room that know me, my background is in marketing. I got a marketing degree. I was in marketing for like 15 years. And when I started teaching marketing classes at different universities here, I fell in love with this idea of training and facilitating. So when we started this company, I went to my business partners and said, yeah, I'll help with the marketing, but as soon as I can, I'd like to shove that off because my passion is teaching and facilitating and speaking and coaching and working with executive teams. And so we sculpted my job to the point where I could get out of marketing. And now I'm like the chief learning guy here at FindMojo. And I love it when I can just build programs and do stuff like this, you know, versus managing the Google AdWords account. Forget that, you know, right? That's important.
It is. Let's get weird for just 1 second, then we'll wrap it up. I'm not a huge fan of communism, and I've always been interested in what motivates a communist. So if we had like
It's got
Mao
dark real quick.
Zedong and Lenin and Stalin and Trotsky and all of those, would this work with a group of people like that where it's like, what are you on about right now?
Yeah, I mean, these are all intrinsic motivators. So if they answered the questions honestly, there'd be some things that might surprise us. You know, and we can make some assumptions based on what we know. But a lot of what we're basing those assumptions on, we're basing it on their personality traits, how they act, right, and not what their drivers are. You know, but I'm sure that I'm sure that a lot of these guys, they're doers. They get things done, so they probably have some achiever DNA. They probably have, you know, empathy's probably fairly low for them, right? But you know, who knows? Like, a lot of it depends upon their current situation too. So it'd be fascinating though to see. And it is fascinating to see, not to compare like, you know, high-level Fortune 500 CEOs to communist dictators, but it is crazy to see what drives some of these people. You'd be surprised, you know. I had one CEO, he's got 7 kids. Family came in 20 out of 23. I'm like, let's dial up social services, bud. We're taking your kids. They don't care about your kids, you know. And the reality is, he's like, no, you know what? It's very important to me. Everything else I do is for my family. And so I feel like if these other things are in alignment, that my family will be taken care of. So a lot of it too is just the lens in which we view things, because like, take impact as a motivator. If we all had impact in our top 7, everybody might view their definition of impact a little differently than the core definition. It might be impact in my job, impact in my company, impact in the community for the greater good. So we all still have our own kind of lens in which we view things.
Yeah, for sure. Well, thank you so much, Paul. I've really enjoyed this conversation. And
likewise.
For folks, you know, individuals and then companies and organizations, if they would like to get involved with y'all, what's the best way?
Yeah, findmojo.com, all one word, and just like it's spelled. If you go to findmojo.com/request, if you fill out the form, you can request a free code. We'll send it to you. So if you want to know what motivates you, we'll give you a free Motivators Assessment. If you want to know what motivates your boss, let us know. We can probably give them one too. And because what happens is when people take the assessment, they're like, okay, this is cool. I want to know what motivates the rest of my organization. I want to know how we can like infuse this and kind of find that mojo. So
Perfect. Thank you, Paul.
thank you.